Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about shifts in enterprise IT spending, and we're also taking a look at the role of the CIO in allocating those resources. To discuss that, I'm joined by two very special guests. With me is Jay Upchurch, Executive Vice President and CIO at SAS. Jay, hello to you.
Hello, James. How are you?
Great, and good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also with me is Wang, Principal Analyst and Founder of Constellation Research. Ray, happy Friday to you.
Hey, happy Friday. What's going on?
So enterprise IT spending, I think it's interesting because it's forecast to be up modestly this year, which is, I find fascinating because there's so much talk about recession, and yet still enterprise IT spending appears to be trending upward, or at least we think it will. However, maybe there's more going on underneath the surface, underneath that top line number. Jay, what do you see in terms of enterprise IT spending these days? What's shaping things?
Well, I think you're right in the perception of the question of enterprise and why is it going up, especially given the economic headwinds. I think sometimes people get confused between enterprise spend forecasting and maybe more what's going on in the consumer world. Enterprise, I think most of the research says, hey, up to maybe 3% up for this year, over year. I think it's actually really interesting because it's not recession proof. We still have the ability as IT leaders to put things on hold or pace those a little bit, but there's still a substantial amount of my budget every year that's basically already pre-spent before the year even gets started.
Ray, what would you add about that? What's going on with enterprise IT spending these days?
Oh, you're totally right. I mean, what we're seeing is about 2.8 to 3.2%, depending on the size of company in terms of where the budgets are. You know, the big categories are analytics, automation, AI, cloud, cybersecurity. Those are the ones that people are definitely investing in. And I think what's interesting about this is, you know, there's a lot of investment still from digital transformation all the way to just getting into the cloud, right? Some of the basics are happening, and CIOs all across the board realize that these are longer term projects. This isn't just a one-off, we're going to just invest in the cloud this year. No, that's not going to happen. So it's a lot more projected projects that are actually planned out, and definitely a lot more budget cycles that have gone through, you know, approvals pre the, you know, kind of any recessionary feels or cautionary feels that people have.
On that note, Ray, I think there's a sense among companies that they can't afford to slow down spending, even though in some cases they might want to. They realize the train is leaving the station with a lot of these emerging technologies. They need to spend money on them.
Yeah, I mean, I just had lunch with a CIO that was basically took their hosting costs from 1.2 million on AWS and got it to 600,000 just by refactoring. Right. And so there's a lot of focus, but, you know, they built a project around that. And the spending is to get the cost savings, and it's also get the revenue growth.
Mm-hmm. All right, there's a few points about the life and the life of the CIO, and I think we should run through the really interesting points the two of you have made. It's CIO budgets. Much of a CIO's budget is allocated before the year begins. So does a CIO truly allocate funds? Jay, what is your immediate experience?
Well, my experience is that most of my budget's already pre-spent. I mean, whether or not it's a commitment on a foundational platform that I'm just continuing to adopt and expand the usage of. We might have a small percentage of my base that's optional based on a strategic initiative for that year. You know, sometimes we have conversations around what's truly discretionary. So again, in the face of economic headwinds, could we retract some? The reality is there's probably a very small percentage, call it 10 to 15%, that's truly discretionary in any given year.
What would happen if, say, you're halfway through the fiscal year and someone said we need to do this, or goodness, this is going up, this is going down? I mean, what kind of flexibility might you have?
Now you're into some tough negotiations with your suppliers, right? I mean, I think where Ray was going a minute ago, you've got large spend that you have either on software as a service or in your public cloud for infrastructure. Obviously carry a large percentage of your expense and labor. There's only so many levers that you can pull at that point in the year. You really got to get in front of it earlier. You can delay projects. We do that from time to time where we need to. In our business specific to SaaS, we're out trying to spend more to get our IT infrastructure and especially our lead to cash programs ready, because we've got an IPO in our future.
Interesting. That's interesting. Ray, your thoughts on the CIO budgets in terms of does a CIO truly allocate funds?
You know, it's like state budgets. You know, everything's pre-allocated, as Jay mentioned. It's definitely happening that way. But I think the difference is when we look at spend, we look at the business side of the house and we look at the tech side of the house. And the tech side of the house, yes, the 80% that's being spent on infrastructure, the 20% that be spent on integration, right? Those buckets are already allocated. You're not going to go anywhere. But it's the business spend that's always very interesting to see. Are they building an innovative project? Is there some other project that's designed that's being led by a line of business leader instead? And that's where we see some of the flexibility where people incorporate that in terms of their strategic plans. So cloud infrastructure, done. But hey, you want to do a digital monetization project? Okay, let's go pitch that and we might get somewhere there. Or you want to do analytics project or AI project? That's definitely hot right now. And we're definitely seeing budgets pop up and open up in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
One thing just to add on to that, James, if you don't mind, is just
Yeah.
all around that point of how much of the IT budget is influenced by the business unit and is carried in your normal P&L review. One of the things that's fascinating for me is that we kind of operate a little bit straddling the fence. I've got a performance management model and a management model. Management's direct, of course, on the performance side. Now I got to get back out into allocations. And how do we allocate back out to the business units the spend that we have in IT and infrastructure or even public cloud, to Ray's point? And how do we track that back and make sure that we have a true unit of cost for things like the cost of HR, legal, finance, and others in our business? That's always a challenge for an IT leader. So when we sit here and we think about budget, how much of that is, I want to say, held hostage, if you will, by those business units that have those initiatives that come versus how much is truly at my discretion as far as how we want to allocate them out to new projects this year.
Yeah, Jay brings a really good point, right? Because what actually happens if you're trying to compare apples to apples and your business is hiding the tech budget and it's not completely allocated, right? You might not even have a good comparison as to what percentage of actually technology budget or technology spend is actually being done in an organization.
Well, what about the role of the CIO as a service provider? So, Jay, as a CIO, what's your approach to being a service provider to your organization? So, possibly some challenges there.
I mean, look, I think that's the role of the modern CIO, right? Years ago, the CIO was just that technology leader, probably came in with an arrogance around being the smartest IT guy in the room, took orders from people, and we kind of delivered back what we felt like maybe what we knew they wanted, but maybe not necessarily what they asked for, right? People circumvented the IT organization and the rigidness of it, especially with the emergence of cloud and software as a service and the democratization of IT. Today, IT had to pivot. We had to come back and say, no, you know what? We're a service provider. We got to get back to the roots of why we exist. My shop is organized in the way of the services that we deliver the company. So we know that we have to treat all of our employees as customers, each of our division leaders as customers. We have a business relationship management model where we embed IT consultants and resources in each of the divisions. So we can be empathetic to what they're working on, what their goals are, and then we can shape demand of IT back to the division that we serve. Mm-hmm. And that's proven to be, I think, highly effective. I've become a trusted partner there as IT into the business, even though I don't necessarily walk the walk of finance, legal, or HR, or R&D and others every day. I think that also has taken the role of the CIO and elevated it more towards a strategic advisor, right, on where the business is going. I think that's earned the right for CIOs to sit not only at the business roundtable for your own company. It's also part of the reason why you see so many CIOs being appointed to public boards these days. You want to have that technology voice at the table. We can kind of be a bridge to translate cybersecurity and what's going on in technology, how to adopt cloud appropriately, where not to adopt cloud appropriately. And I think boards are hungry for that type of insight.
Well, then I would assume, obviously, your voice is going to be heard loud and clear in terms of next year's spending priorities. So you're surely going to help shape that, even if this year is mostly spent.
With the exception of those places where, those divisions as business units are kind of saying, hey, look, I need to go do this project. In those cases, that budget allocation, I'm partnering with them on it to try to stay in front of it as much as I can.
Ray, your thoughts on the CIO as a service provider?
Yeah, we definitely seen that shift. And I think one of the important things that every CIO is trying to accomplish right now is really be more responsive in their organizations and actually get proactive as needs change. In a lot of organizations, what we're seeing is the consolidation of spend, right? They're trying to do better vendor management, better procurement, but at the same time, they're trying to respond and be more agile and actually address new needs, right? The number of new products that are being put out, the number of new technologies that they've got to consume. And so they're trying to manage that portfolio. And so wherever they can start standardization, they're starting to do that. And as a service provider, that's where they get the scale, they get the ability to actually deliver services at the right SLAs. And then for the new stuff, right, they're putting in rules or policies that say, hey, go explore it, If it meets this criteria, come back. Let's see how we can actually integrate this back into the stack. And we're actually seeing those kind of conversations pop up. So consolidation at the vendor level, reducing the number of vendors they work with to get the standardization, and then experimentation with startups and whatever new technologies that are out there, led by business, led by IT, doesn't matter. And then an evaluation to say, when do we bring this back into the stack?
That's a really great point though, Ray, because a lot of the times as an IT leader, we're going to say, hey, look, we have these foundational tools that we want to run the entire enterprise with, but how do you empower the divisions to go out and experiment and see and explore and then co-innovate together based on their exploration, but still come back to some level of enterprise standardization that allows you to run IT in a cost-effective way for your company. That's absolutely something we're trying hard to do. I wouldn't say we've got it right yet. But we're learning and watching and seeing, and then we use that to influence what is our technology foundation here at SAS.
What about the role of CIO as traffic cop? I find this one really interesting because there's a lot of shadow IT that has gone on historically in enterprise IT, and it has a negative naming that a lot of actually forward movements have happened because of it. All those people within different divisions, they have the credit card and they're setting up cloud instances, and could be a certain amount of chaos going on there. And yet at the same time, I mean, shadow IT has created a lot of innovation. Jay, what is your take on CIO as traffic cop? You sort of have to manage the resources and how they're managed and spent.
Yeah, I'd say kind of two dimensions to that question. I think the first one is shadow IT a bad thing? And I would say it's not.
Okay, interesting.
I embrace it. I love it. I think I'll take innovational help anywhere I can get it. So I would not be a CIO who chases that and tries to consolidate that down or build that into the IT fiefdom, if you will. I would embrace that model. I like the idea of citizen development as long as I can put it within safe guardrails for the company. So again, I'll crowdsource innovation all day long. I think another question on traffic cop would be more specific to public cloud. So in our case, we entitle the organization 12,000 strong to go out and have their own subscriptions in the public cloud. That's dangerous in some cases because an employee, maybe unintentionally, has the ability to drive up a substantial IT cloud spend, if you will. So without the proper governance and guardrails there, we can get into trouble. I do not want to be in a position as a CIO to go and tell people no or not to do this and kind of throttle back what could become creative innovation. On the other hand, I got to put in place enough of guardrails and compliance to ensure that it doesn't get out of hand too fast. Ray and I were talking earlier today on another topic, and one of them happened to be analytic workloads and how an analytic workload, again, from a SaaS perspective, could easily drive up a cloud bill if you're not careful with it, just because of the nature of the workload. So we have to be careful and make sure that our employees, while we want to give them unfederated access and control and ability to explore and be curious, we do have to kind of put some guardrails in place that says, hey, we're gonna use our management layer to keep an eye on exactly where things are going. That gets me out of again being the traffic cop and puts me more in a position of, hey, I'm a service provider. I'm providing you the flexibility and capability to do this, but I'm relying on the organization to govern itself.
It is a concerning note, the idea that maybe one employee could run up a pretty substantial public cloud bill, and it wouldn't even be that hard, actually. And I'm sure they're well intentioned. Ray, your thoughts on the CIO as a traffic cop?
Your credit card limit is really your limit. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the traffic cop's kind of important, right? I mean, there's got to be adults in the room at some point to say, don't do this, or, here's where we can open up some opportunities, or here's where we integrate. And so I think the forward-looking CIOs in our 1,000-member network that we work with, they tend to leave the guidelines that Jay's talking about, right? It's really important to say, here's some technologies that are never going to enter our system, and these are completely limited, and these are ones we're open to kind of exploring to see where they are. Let's pass some security review tests. Let's pass a light architecture test. Okay, fine, good, let's go, right? And the more agile you're about it, the more you can kind of experiment with what you're trying to do. At the same time, leaning hard on your vendors is also happening as part of that traffic cop, because there are a lot of features that really should be in the core. People are asking for that and asking those customers to put those into the roadmaps so that they can actually eliminate another vendor or reduce the amount of integration they have to deal with, or reduce the level of vendor procurement that's going on. So I think the traffic cop analogy is picking up more, and we're also seeing a shift again where a lot of CIOs are now reporting back to CFOs as economy changes. We're seeing some of that conversation as to, hey, hey, what did you really spend that on? And why is that there? And those conversations that weren't there as we were coming out of the pandemic, where everything was going digital, was technology, projects were going everywhere, right? The controls have now come back and spending limits have come down and more people are involved in decision making. So
I agree with you 100%. I would say that the days of kind of long past now, just financial transparency in terms of what we're spending. Now it's much more telemetry around what are those workloads? Why are you doing them? How do you justify them? So we do put in place some level of observation that allows us to give us some of that kind of real-time information, so we can empower the management tiers to kind of help influence those guidelines, right? That you're saying that we roll out from an IT standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Ray, one thing you said I thought bears a little repeating, and that you talked about leaning into the vendors, talking about cross control. Could you speak a little bit about what that means to lean into the vendors?
Yeah, for example, if you bought product A from a company and it does marketing automation, right, and you needed to integrate it with a finance tool, right, and they should have built the integration adapter and they haven't done that. It's like, hey guys, can you help us out, right? Can you build that? Check it in, put the code in there. Another great example is, there's a feature that just came out. Like maybe what we want to do is enable, I don't know, a chat GPT interface, right? Fine, great. So you'd want to lean on the vendor to provide that capability and say, hey, where is that on the roadmap? Can you put that in? Or maybe there's something that's being deprecated, right? And everybody needs like a regulatory compliance, an item that comes up and shows up as legislation. Make sure that shows up in the release in time and, get our feedback, right? Maybe people have different ways of dealing with it because of geography or industry or even size of company.
Well, I think the big question is the future of enterprise IT spending, because changes are coming. Obviously, technology is changing. What can we look forward to in terms of enterprise IT spending in the years ahead? Jay, what is your sense on this one?
I don't see it slowing down. Even though we've got economic headwinds, like I said before, I don't see us slowing down. It's imperative for companies to stay in front of the technology. Gives us all a strategic advantage. I think there's a lot of labor shortage right now. That's a concern. And I think that people look to technology to augment their human capital. So I don't see IT slowing down. I also find it fascinating too. I run IT internally for SAS, but I also own the commercial side of our SaaS cloud distribution model. And one of the things that I see all the time with customers coming to me is, hey, we can't find the talent. Can you do it for us? Can you offer it as a managed service? Can you put it out there as a software as a service? Mm-hmm. So I know the demand for the services is still strong. So I don't see that side of the IT spend, slowing down anytime soon. The other thing I'd say that's interesting is just labor rates. The fact of the matter of people being able to work from anywhere for any company is raising the bar, I think, on labor rates. If you had a location strategy before in your past, it may not be as relevant as it is today. So vendors are finding it that it's harder and more expensive to keep our talent. And then if you're losing your talent, then your outsourced spend is now increasing because that talent's probably going across the street to a service provider who's then charging you more for the same labor. So I just don't see IT spending slowing down right now.
On the idea of the remote work, I thought it might work the opposite, in that there's people working in San Francisco and now they're moving to Iowa or a suburb of Phoenix, and they don't need to charge as much. But you're actually saying the remote work world could increase labor rates.
It is in our experience so far. Again, we're still in the early innings. We are seeing labor rates increase in what were lower cost areas. People are moving to lower cost regions to live and have a better life work balance, of course. But it is raising the rates in those lower cost regions because people are coming from a place where they were used to a higher labor rate. That was reoccurring. We, SAS, are obviously based in North Carolina. North Carolina is a wonderful economy and a growing IT hotbed. And we are seeing those labor rates increasing over and over again, especially as West Coast individuals are moving or Northeastern are moving down. It speaks a lot to the environment that we live in, but it also speaks a lot to what's going on right now in the post-pandemic economy.
Ray, your view on the future of enterprise IT spending? Some big changes are coming.
Yeah, we're actually going to spend more time on soft skills than technology, right? A lot of it around adoption, in terms of learning new skills much more quickly, a lot of it on training. And part of the basis for that is really automation. Talking to one of our clients this morning, I was actually very astounded by the level of automation they were able to do. They went from being able to service a company with 300 folks in one shop to about 43. right? And then redeploying those folks to actually work on new projects instead, right? And so we're going to see a lot more of like the basic things were highly repetitive tasks, massive volume, large nodes of interaction, areas that require massive time to scale. Those are going to be automated, and that's going to be built into that budget, and that's going to power savings that allow people to start doing innovation around things around creativity or highly complex algos or things that require a lot more human touch. And so there's going to be trade-offs in terms of what you're doing. And so I think the first part, when we think about just budgets, the question is like, where do you automate? So is it fully intelligently automated? Is it augmented, the machines being augmented by human as we're doing training? Or is it being augmented, is a human being augmented by machine so we get better at it? Or when do we insert the human touch because we want it to be more personalized, or we want to put a human in the loop? And I think that is the big question everyone's going to think about as they look at IT spend. I think the second piece that's important is really what we talked about earlier. Analytics, automation, AI, cloud, and security are still hot areas. They're foundational for almost everything we do going forward. And you're going to see a lot of the spend in that area. And then the third thing is like, the business and tech savviness is actually there, right? We saw the rise of chief digital officers, and these aren't just glorified CTOs anymore. These are folks with P&L responsibility. These are folks that are in operating roles. And as these CDOs start taking charge, technology is incorporated in every single part of the project or part of the decision. And so I think that's going to change the way we look at spend. It is much more aligned with where the business is headed, and much more important in terms of where the company's valuations are going to be.
Mm-hmm. The really fascinating part of that is the idea of soft skills, and soft skills being ever more important. We're living in a world where technology is way more capable, and yet still the humans need to be still more. I'm not sure what my question is. I just find it fascinating that soft skills are more important than ever before. Jay, your thoughts, like what do companies do in terms of navigating that world of we need soft skills, we need to be improving in that area?
I think the interesting point on that is also related back to the analytics and AI. Ray mentioned ChatGPT before.
Mm-hmm.
You got to explain it. It's almost like having that child in elementary school who's frustrated. They know the answer in math, but the math teacher is saying, you need to explain, you need to show your work and your homework. So having the ability to communicate and speak about what's going on, what you're seeing, being transparent and clear, being responsible in the actions that you're taking and how you're deploying technology, that is part of that soft skill that technologists really need to understand and embrace. And I agree 100% with Ray. That is becoming more and more and more important. You can find engineering capability. You can find people that are very comfortable behind their keyboard. Putting them out into an organization, asking them to collaborate and explain and embrace and show responsible use of technology to meet a business objective is absolutely important. When we look for talent at SAS, it's absolutely soft skills. It's curiosity. People who are just naturally curious and want to continue to explore. And then it's obviously those that align more to our business and our core values.
Interesting. Ray, Jay, the two of you said a lot of good material. I'm wondering if you have any closing thoughts. Jay, any closing thoughts on the shape of enterprise IT to come?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's fascinating for CIOs to get that request from a CFO about, hey, you need a budget reduction or constraint. Fact of the matter is, from a CIO's perspective, right, we wrestle with this. I'd say 80% of our budget is already pre-spent, pre-allocated before the year even starts. There might be a slice or sliver, right, that's specific to a business unit that's driving an initiative. The reality is I have a very small part of my budget that is discretionary. And so we have this interesting pressure as ITs, because we looked upon as being the IT leader of the company. And really, there's only so much that we can influence and drive each and every day.
Mm-hmm. Ray, what would you add? One last thought about enterprise IT in the future?
Look, we've got to be dynamic, and we have to realize, understand our budgets at the operational level and at the strategic level. And I think we've got a brand new class of CIOs. The modern CIO gets that. They understand the alignment, and they actually understand how to respond to business needs. The beauty is that as we enter in the cloud, the hybrid architectures, we have a lot more options and choices that we didn't have before. And we can actually move at a speed we couldn't move before, but we have to move just as quickly. And so when we're operating in machine scale, we also have to think about how we operate in human scale.
It was so true. Jay, Ray, thank you so much for speaking to me today. A lot of good stuff. I definitely learned something. Come back and talk with us again sometime. Thanks.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.